It is Saturday, the 21st of the 2nd, 2026. The time is 5 minutes past 9 British, and that means, as always, that there are a multitude of F1 centric threads at which we need to pull. Of course, we're going to talk about Andrea Stella's comments, the rule changes potentially, and how he sees the F1 hierarchy going into 2026. T-minus 13 days until we'll see cars out on track being driven in anger. Racing. How do you like yourself some F1? I would say that it's about bloody time. So too, we'll talk about Nostradamus chiming in on Red Bull and their performance curve, how ready they are to go head to head with the likes of Mercedes and McLaren and potentially Scuderia Ferrari. So too, we'll have a look at the one that they call Kimi Antonelli and Bono celebration settings. We'll talk about DC saying that Lewis Hamilton has made a mistake going to Ferrari, not having brought somebody, and the fact that he's doing an apples and oranges unfair compare and contrast, different eras. DC. So too, we'll talk about Sir Lewis Hamilton, who said that he's not leaving Wolf of Wall Street settings, which I think is quite interesting, especially against the backdrop of Chris Harris and Manish Pandey's comments that they expected Lewis Hamilton to at the very least consider retirement if he didn't like what he saw from Scuderia Ferrari at the Bahrain test. It will get techier than techie things, chat, and it's a conversation. Tale to the viewer legend John, absolute legendary settings. It's a conversation today. We'll go long, T-minus 52 minutes. Let me show you this in the first instance before we broach the Lewis Hamilton conversation, because Antonelli was out here causing chaos. What a menace, this Kimi Antonelli chap. And some say that this dude is ready to challenge for a championship of the driver's variety against his teammate, the one that they call King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk. Roll the clip.
Why have you got a water gun?
I need to hit Bono because yesterday for his birthday I granted it because obviously it was not the best of days. Let's see. Oh, it's working. We need to make sure Bono is not leading.
Go. Run.
Man, that was spot on. 2 shots. No, it's okay, enough. That was your birthday yesterday. Start making a plan, I don't like it. Hello, dude. No, I don't worry. Yeah, he's insane, he's wrong. Look at that. Coming up the side. Is it that colour? Yeah. I've come all this way to say hi to you. Happy birthday, ready for the other day.
What's in the bottle?
This is Bono's revenge.
What's in it?
No water, man. Still deal with it, man. Is it just Tabasco in water?
I love it.
Got him. He got what he deserved, didn't he, Kimi? And again, he said he was going to spare Bono on his birthday because they'd had a tough day the prior day. It had been reliability at which their session had failed. However, he decided he was going to get him. Do you know what I mean? And I don't mind the jokes. However, Kimi Antonelli is a young buck, isn't he? And it comes across in that piece of footage that he's only bloody 18, 19, not long come out of school. You mean to tell me, therefore, that this dude is ready to do what Lewis did to Alonso in 07? To King George Russell? I'm not so sure, Jack. Is this me saying that Kimi won't take points off of George from time to time? Any given Sunday, of course, he's got the speed too, but that he can challenge George in a Mercedes, a team that he's built up for the past, I don't know how many years, nearly 4. I'm not sure. I think we might be, I think that might be wishful thinking, especially given the fact that George feels like he's coming into his villain arc proper. I was having a conversation with a friend today, and I was trying to think who George Russell reminds me of, and you know what? I think I've got it, chat. He reminds me of Michael Schumacher. There's something almost dead in his eyes. You know, when he's got that steely look, he's so focused on getting the W. There is no line beyond which he will not cross. And that reminds me of Michael in his heyday, in his prime, because Michael was like that, right? And I think we're going to see that from George this year. Now, if Max gets himself a car, then Houston, we have ourselves a problem, George. But if, as is the rumour, Maximilian Verstappen does not have himself a car, then I think George Russell finds himself in pole position for the championship, unless, chat, Scuderia Ferrari have built themselves a car. Now, we've got to talk about this properly. I'll set the scene. I think that Scuderia, I still don't believe that Scuderia Ferrari have turned the corner. What's epitomised their performance over the past 5 or 6 or 7 or 18 years has been underperformance, that they've promised a lot and delivered nothing against aforementioned promise. Do you know what I mean? They've been woefully poor. Last year, you only need to listen to their communication on the radio, something for which they still haven't solved as far as Sir Lewis Hamilton's race engineer is concerned. Would they build themselves a car? Would they succeed where they'd failed in previous years? Lest we forget that 2024, at the end of, they had the quickest car, some said, only a couple of points away from a Constructors' Championship that year. And they decided to do what? Not build upon it, continuously improve. They decided they were going to start from scratch. What? Makes no sense. This is very poor low-level decision making. Again, has come to engender, no, epitomise exactly what Scuderia Ferrari are about. So you forgive me for not having faith in them. Faith, some say, is belief without evidence, but we have evidence, don't we, now that Scuderia Ferrari have at the very least thought about their car. There's a lot of hype around Charles Leclerc. The quickest lap, day 3, the quickest lap of the session. And again, he was quickest amongst across all sectors. And that has to mean something. Take a look at this and you tell me that Charles Leclerc is lacking for confidence. Did he just look in the camera and wink? I think there's something going on over there at Scuderia Ferrari. Now, if we're talking about evidence, what's going on, Rob? You're a legend. Dustin, we'll talk. I need to pitch to you these exhibit A, B, and C's in the first. He did look in the listen. There's a confidence over there at Fiorano Maranello. All of a sudden, they feel like they've done something, and here's why. Techie chat. Sir John, you're an absolute legend out here gifting memberships. If you're a brand new member, get yourself over to community tab, and shortly thereafter get yourself in the Discord, if of course you are that way inclined. Now, in the first instance, what have Ferrari done? There's just a feeling that they've been more critical in their thinking, in their approach to the brand new rule and reg set that is 2026. Take a look at that wing. You see it goes upside down. The rotary wing, that's chaos. Nobody else has done that. And if indeed they're going to do that within the next 13 days before the Australian Grand Prix, round 1 of 24, then they'll need to get a move on, because that will need some engineering. Now, I like Alpine's solution, but is it as revolutionary as Ferrari's? I don't think so. Also, and this potentially is more controversial, yielding more advantage than the wing, this exhaust flap, as they're calling it, mention no names, the blown exhaust diffuser, 2010 settings, Sebastian Vettel settings. If that is filtering clean air through to the diffuser, just as Seb's iteration of the Red Bull did in 2010, then Houston, we could have a problem. That might be part of the story why Lewis Hamilton is in resurgence mode, remembering who he is in real time. You're sitting going through the medium speed turns that so epitomise Bahrain. All of a sudden, Lewis is last of the late breakers again. Why? Well, because he's got bloody more downforce and therefore more confidence in the rear, and his ability to manipulate the car in and on and around the limits of adhesion. Something's going on there at Ferrari. There is something. Now, listen, did we think they're the quickest car? They were, in absolute terms, on the last day of testing. But again, if you're going to have yourself a big boy conversation, you need to normalise for variables. Now, most F1 aficionados say this, including Andrea Stella, by the way, that it's two-tiered, that it looks like it's Ferrari and Mercedes, and then Red Bull and McLaren fighting for third and fourth. Listen, I think this is a bit more nuanced than that, because I think you've got to look at race simulations to understand and try and normalise for variables, because ultimately during the race sims they will all have fuel to do a proper race distance, and in those ultimately Scuderia Ferrari were quickest on the final day. However, what's worthy of mention is that Mercedes on the final day, when the car was at its most rubbered in, quickest, evolved, Mercedes did not do a race simulation. Therefore, it is apples and oranges. I would argue with their compression ratio trick, how good everybody says that car looks, how planted it looks both on into the corner and at the exit. I would argue that Mercedes, once they turn up their car to 12 from 7, as it has been in testing, as some say, then I reckon that Mercedes is going to be a god tier car. I think people will struggle to beat it. But that doesn't mean to say that in the hands of Charles Leclerc and or Sir Lewis Hamilton, especially given those bloody rocket fuel starts reminiscent of Alonso 05, 06, that they might not be that there might be a challenge in there. Let me tell you this though, and again, over at Aston Martin, I've got to keep talking about Aston Martin because they're not doing so well. I cannot believe that Ferrari all of a sudden find themselves as a championship contender, and conversely, an Adrian Newey-led Aston Martin in collaboration with Honda are nowhere. Some say they might be last. Just how last? Well, Ed Straw expounds upon that on the latest and greatest, the Race podcast. Have a listen.
You know, the numbers are all bad for them. They were 4 seconds off the pace in terms of best time in this test. At the bottom of the mileage charts, again, I'm mixing mileage and kilometerage. That's not a word, but 2,111 kilometres they've managed over Barcelona in the Bahrain tests. Mercedes at the top, 6,193 kilometres, and the next worst is Cadillac with 3,935, not far off twice as what Aston Martin have. So, Samarth, it's clear Aston Martin is not going to be a fun place to be right now. There's not going to be a quick turnaround, is it? This is going to be a long way back.
You mean to tell me if the critical success factor in testing is miles completed, that Cadillac F1 as the brand new entrant in Formula 1 have completed nearly twice as much laps and therefore mileage as Aston Martin and Adrian Newey led Aston Martin? Oh, the humanity, for real, for real. That, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury's case, who'd have thunk it? I never thought we would see these absolute scenes. And of course, if you're going to dissect for the problems, they are multitudinous over there at Aston. You got to talk about the power unit. Again, Honda, overweight, underpowered. So too, you got to talk about the lack of preparation. You got to talk about the fact that they rocked up to the behind closed door test at Barcelona late, a day late, and $1 short. That, I would argue, if you are Adrian Newey and he's the team principal, isn't good enough. Yeah, I get it. He likes to spend as much time in the factory, building as much durable competitive advantage into the infrastructure of the car. I get it. But again, I would still argue that that's not good enough. His excuse will be, of course, the fact that he only started in March, meaning, therefore, he's only had 9 months to build a car and he can't work miracles in that time. And it feels and looks like that's what's needed. However, if you're talking about Honda, then you've got to talk about the team principal role, that this isn't just nominal, it's substantive as well. And when asked, when the accredited F1 media are pitching at Aston Martin for answers to very important exam questions, what's going wrong? Where's your pace? When are you going to get it back on track? The only person fielding those questions isn't Adrian Newey, the team principal. It is Pedro de la Rosa, the ambassador. You tell me about those optics, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, for I think that they are not good. Then you got to talk about the lack of preparedness that Honda brought one bloody battery that they were running out, so they only completed 6 laps on the final day. 6 laps. This is some sort of expectation pressure doom loop out of which there is no escape currently for Aston Martin. You need to go and complete laps so you can see how fast and slow your car is and fix for any reliability issues. They cannot do either. This is bonkers. Chat, normally when Adrian Newey builds a car, it's very fast but very unreliable. But this time, it feels like it's all of the bad things, unreliable and also slow. You already know that the stat, 1.5 seconds of the 4.5 second adverse delta is attributable to the Honda PU. The other 3 seconds is the bloody car, the sexy aerodynamic beast that we expected Adrian Newey to. But this is... I promise you, chat, this isn't getting... Now, I'm not gonna undermine Adrian Newey's goatedness. I mean, 13 drivers, 13 constructors, 13 drivers, 12 constructors. I always forget which way round it is. It might actually be the other way round. But I mean, if there were such a thing as a guarantee in Formula One of success in aerodynamicist form, then it would be Adrian Newey. But this is not good. John says, stop blaming Adrian Newey. I mean, he's got to take some blame though, mate. This is the problem. He will always take some blame. Nobody even knows the names of the other people operating at Aston Martin. Do you know what I mean? Lawrence, Mike Crack, Adrian Newey. Who else? Pedro De La Rosa, Alonso. Those are the bods. Do you know what I mean? And you've got to point your finger at somebody. And because Adrian Newey has the biggest name and has the most accolades as far as winning championships, it will be him. This is chaos, chat. Genuinely, I think this is the biggest story to come out of testing. The extent, not that they're slow, but the extent of the slowness. 4.5 seconds. Rumour, word on the F1 curb is that when we go to Australia, potentially it might be a bit close for them. They remember they need to meet the 107% threshold of whatever times completed the fastest time in Q1, and it might be a bit. They might not even be able to complete any laps, for Pete's sake. 6 laps. This is a problem. Stop blaming Newey. He designs the cars and runs the team. It's again, Ali. It's not a bad shout. It isn't a bad shout. Sadly, because his name is so big, people will always point the finger at him. It's a conversation that we're going to need to get. And imagine Adrian Newey looking at this saying like, well, I've got Alonso and it's always been my dream to work this dude. But in the other car, we have a passenger. You think Lance Stroll is helping or hindering that operation? And again, if you're talking teamwork and team ethos, trying to build a streamlined team that operates in a way that is agile, and your team is only as strong as its weakest link. Mention no names, Lance Stroll. But sadly for Adrian Newey, he is the son of the owner. So what do you do that? How do you square for that personnel circle, Adrian Newey, if again, leadership and team principle is the role that they've given it? I listen, it's all chaos. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to it is, but we're going to see. Imagine they get to Australia and don't make it through to... They're like 108% of Q1, the fastest time in Q1. Oh, the humanity. Newey dropped in halfway during Denver. This is true. It's Newey's fault for not designing the PU and giving visual. And the sad point in that, if we're going to play ironic games, is that imagine... I mean, they've built a brand new gearbox. This is the first time building a gearbox because they always had to take Mercedes previously because they were a Mercedes customer team. So if we're playing F1 sliding doors for a second, imagine that they said, you know what, this Honda fit, let's not bite off too much. Let's make our objectives smart, realistic. And why don't we keep this Mercedes PU? Because I think they might do bits in 2026 just as they did previously in 2014. Why don't we just keep the Mercedes PU and therefore the Mercedes gearbox? Can you imagine when Adrian Newey gets it right paired with a Mercedes P? I'm telling you. It would get techie. Leclerc over Hamilton will get to it, mate. I promise you, silent hour. Lance Stroll World Championship is delayed until at least 2026. Well, 2028 they said. They said they're scrapping 2026 because they don't have a car that's ready to complete a race, let alone complete a race and challenge for race victories. It depends if it's a design problem or an operational problem. Both, Daniel. Both, mate. Adrian Newey's already told you that he doesn't have the right people in the right places, that you can spend 250 million on a factory like Lawrence Stroll has and another 50 million on a wind tunnel and give up God knows how much, copious amounts of equity, that you can do all that. But if you don't have the right people in the right positions, then it's all nonsense. It's all for nothing. And that's why Adrian Newey's got his spies running up and down the Aston Martin factory to try and understand, audit the processes, then understand what's going. I think he needs to send his spies to Japan as well. Do you know what I mean? Honda are chaos merchants. It's beginning to look a lot like 2015, 2017. And for Alonso, my heart breaks. He's been waiting so patiently for this Adrian Newey fella to come and design him a rocket ship. And it sounds and looks and feels like his final stanza, his final tour in F1 in 2026 is going to be punctuated by a car that's not commensurate for his not insubstantial skills behind the wheel of an F1 car. Do we know what the main culprit is at Aston Martin? And this is what I'm saying, Neil. I heard it's the gearbox first, mate. It's everything. The gearbox can't handle the much needed aggressive downshift that we saw Max Verstappen doing. The car's too unreliable. It's difficult to drive because that's how Adrian Newey builds his cars. Super ambitious. You saw the bloody anti-dive and the anti-squat. The suspension looks like a chaos merchant, and it's and to boot, it's unreliable, and the PU doesn't work, and they can't complete. It's just like it's and herein lies the problem. I don't know where they go from here. He's hoping that they can put it together. Now, Alonso, bless him, keeps trying to be positivo. Do you know what I mean? Trust the process. These aren't things that we can't fix, Fernando El Pan Alonso said, and that's positive. But you know, deep inside, he must be raging, and as well he might, because it feels like his final tour is going to be wasted at the altar of poor machinery. And Alonso's career, therefore, full stop, new paragraph, will be epitomised by, I suppose the phrase that I'm looking for is missed opportunity, right? What could have been unfulfilled potential. Alonso is a brilliant driver, chat. You know what I mean? You saw him clearing the track at Hungary or Austria even, just like Michael Schumacher used to. You know what I mean? He's playing 4D level chess, and I think it would be a shame, chat, if indeed you're invested in brilliant racing and a competitive Formula 1 in 26. I think it would be a shame to see Alonso in the mid of the pack, in the carbon fibre zone, not competing for races and championships alongside the likes of Lewis and Charles and of course Max. It will be a shame, telling you. Alonso said that if 2026 is awful, he'll probably stay one more year. So, yeah, it feels like it's topsy-turvy. It's about face, right, as far as the decisions. A couple of weeks ago, on the back of what Manish Pandey, a decent level insider, had said, that potentially Lewis, if he didn't like what he saw at Bahrain, that he might be talking about retiring before a wheel is turned. Now we're having the conversation about Fernando Alonso. This is meant to be his final bloody season. Now he's going to hang around another season when he's got a little one on the way. I don't know. It feels like it feels a bit weird. Recency bias doesn't make Newey any less of a guy. I agree with you, John, but it's hard as an F1 fan, right? Recency bias sometimes is the restaurant at which we dine most frequently. It is very, very hard. And if we're talking about supremacy, go on then, Mercedes potentially. I think Mercedes still have the whip out. I will be honest with you, notwithstanding all of the sexy bits and bobs, the aero, the bloody blown exhaust diffuser flap that Ferrari have got, and the wing and the jet rocket fueled starts, notwithstanding all that, my hunch, my F1 spidey senses are telling me that Mercedes still potentially have the whip hand. And I'm not the only one, because Andrea Stella said something to this effect, and this is being written as headlines at the moment, but again, probably because the news cycle is trophy at the moment. Andrea Stella said words to this effect, that he thinks it's a bit too tiered. He thinks Mercedes and Ferrari, they're your S tier, one tier down, that McLaren, his team, and Red Bull, that's where they reside. That's what his hunch says, trying to normalise for all the different variables to which normal F1 fans do not have access. And again, that's based on Mercedes George Russell's race simulations at the end of the first portion of the Bahrain test last week. Because again, remember, they didn't do any on the last day when the track was at its fastest. Here's why that's a bit of a headline. Because that Andrea Stella isn't wanting to pad his book. Smacks of sandbagging. And Andrew Benson writes an article. In that article, he sheds a bit of light as to why McLaren might be sandbagging here. I didn't know this. And again, this is why you got all F1 journals are created equally, but some are created more equal than others. And Benson is one of the goodest ones, you'll recall. Here's what Benson said. That he understands that the PU in McLaren, the Mercedes one, remember that they are a customer team, isn't even the latest and greatest. It's not the most up-to-date one. As far as Mercedes PUs go, they're the Apple 11, not the latest and great. That's bonkers. I don't want to hear anything from Andrea Stella then, because this is sandbag central. All of them are doing it. They didn't even have the latest Mercedes PU. How did we not know this? Yeah, it's techie, that. It is techie. So you'd imagine then when they rock up to Australia and they've got the best, latest and greatest, most powerful Mercedes PU, then they'll be exponentially quicker with that than they were at Bahrain. I think that speaks to the extent to which Andrea Stella's McLaren have been sandbagging, because lest we forget, they looked quick, right, in the hands of Oscar Piastri in particular. Super planted, very, very talky coming out of the bloody curves. I'm telling you, I think this is sandbagging central. But which one of the teams are not sandbagging? Be a quick exercise to go through that now. Of course, Mercedes are definitely sandbagging. You can see that and feel it. Didn't even do a race simulation. Yeah, potentially they had reliability issues and they weren't sandbagging there. But have they turned their engines, their power units up to 12? Absolutely not. You saw the simulation of them coming at Kimi Antonelli's car coming out of the turns and how much quicker it was than the likes of McLaren and Lewis and Ferrari. Rapid fire. So I don't know. I suppose if you're going to normalise for climate and track and ambient temperatures and compression ratios, I think you've got to give this for Mercedes. But I did not realise, though, chat, that McLaren didn't have the most up-to-date PU. I think that's a bit techie. Then techie things. Get Horner in, Mr. Stroll. Go on then, and you're too kind. So go on, what do we know about this? So at one stage there were conversations had between Horner and Stroll. However, there's a couple of different things that we do know, and you can take these ones to the bank. The reason why Adrian Newey left was in no small part because of what happened between Christian Horner and the PA that they shared. That PA sat across, but the innuendo is right themselves, right? But that PA worked for both Christian Horner and Adrian Newey, and Newey didn't like what was going on there. So part of the reason why he left Red Bull in the first place, which was his baby, the team that he dragged to the top of the mountain top, kicking and screaming with Max Verstappen's help. The reason why he left was because of the Horner nonsense. Now, why would he encourage and rubber stamp Christian Horner joining? There was speculation that in Adrian Newey's contract, there was a stipulation that he could veto Christian Horner joining if indeed he wanted to. Then we hear that they were spotted out at a bloody Oasis concert, and that rift had since healed. But yet and still, Christian Horner, one of his requisites to joining a team, wants equity. And Lawrence has already given away the material portion, a percentage of the equity, to Adrian Newey. So what else is there to give? I think Christian Horner will find himself at Alpine. There is 24% worth of that team ready to be purchased by dint of Otro Capital, Michael B. Jordan and Tom Brady and all them other bots, the celebrity conglomerate. It's a nice, neater fit. And Christian Horner will want to turn around something. He'll want to stamp his name on a turnaround, a success story in F1, for he'll feel like he's got scores to settle. Maybe Horner would be a good, I don't know, maybe Horner would be a good idea, but I feel like at Aston Martin, they've already got Cowell, they've got Lawrence, they've got Adrian Newey, they've got Alonso, they've got Pedro. Too many cooks sometimes spoil the broth. And I just think, I don't know, I think that ship sailed as far as Christian Horner joining Aston Martin. And you know what else I think the ship sailed on? Max Verstappen joining Aston Martin. Do you remember we were talking about that like as if that were a very serious thing that warranted consideration 2 or 3 weeks ago? I think that's gone. What makes you think for a second that Max Verstappen is going to leave the balls that are red in collaboration with Ford to go and join an Aston Martin when they're looking to challenge in 2028? No. I know Max Verstappen wants to potentially, if you're talking about legacy, wants to turn a team around, but not that type of turn a team around. No way, Jose. Absolutely not. Oh, and by the way, go on then. Horner, not enough money, not enough talent, and his new opportunism is in the past. Horner is done. The whole purpose of new becoming TP was to block Horner. Do you think so, mate? Potentially. What about the stipulation in his contract? He wouldn't have needed to, mate, if he had that thing in his contract. This is speculation and conjecture, though, F1 barbershop talk. Agree, he will buy that percentage with a consortium. The rumour is, Turtle, that he already has the investors and financiers in place, just like he tried to do with British financiers and Red Bull Racing Technologies. One of the principal reasons why he lost the political battle over at the Bulls that are red as versus, well, 2, Mintzlaff and Mateschitz et al. Alpine is actually together with Haas, the best outside the top 4. Yeah, Alpine, they're not too bad, to be fair. Better than Williams. They are definitely in better shape than Williams. And I like that bloody wing. Just get rid of it. I mean, listen, have Ferrari over-engineered their solve? I don't know, you can have that conversation. But if you just want to make it DRS, and just get rid of flap altogether, that's got to be exponentially more aerodynamic down the straight than if you just leave the gap between the middle. I like Alpine at the moment. Maybe Christian Horner already has input. What's Horner's age anyway? I mean, he's not a young pup, but he was once upon a time the youngest team principal on the grid when he joined in 2005-ish, when Red Bull bought Jaguar. So I think he's got a lot more. There is a lot more juice in a Christian Horner appointment, I think. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna have this Lewis Hamilton conversation. Yeah, just say it up front. Listen, I got to go scorched earth in it for a second. And excuse me, forgive me, Lord, for I know not what I do. To this Lewis Hamilton conversation, somebody commented on a video earlier, and I'm going to leverage it. I'm going to try and quote it, not verbatim. I will paraphrase. Oh, Cameron's obsessed with this Kim Kardashian nonsense. The stench, I can smell the stench from a mile away. Leave Lewis Hamilton alone with his friend Kim Kardashian. Look, I'd forgotten. I'd forgotten the extent to which some diehard fans can be willful abbots of unreason. You mean to tell me, the base assumption to that comment is that Lewis Hamilton is Kim Kardashian's friend? Huh? Yeah? What? Yeah, of course. No. Sound foundations are your assumptions built up. Listen, here's the problem, chat, and I get this speaking to Mama Cameron, bless her, that there is a halo effect around Sir Lewis Hamilton, so he can do no wrong. No, he'd never want to get with a Kim Kardashian. No, he couldn't make such a faux pas. Absolute nonsense. The two of them are dating. You saw the two of them at the Super Bowl. This is, of course, he's now. I'm only invested in Sir Lewis Hamilton's performance on track. He can do whatever he wants in his personal life, so long as it doesn't impact him to the downside for me on track. That's all that I've ever cared about. And to think that those are separate entities, mutually exclusive as far as outcomes, is absolute nonsense drivel. You would have to be a moron. You can talk all this stuff about, no, ignore, let's not address the Kim Kardashian thing all you want to. If, of course, you don't think that there's going to be a drip feed on Lewis Hamilton's performance on track. But that's not the truth. You would have seen it in 2011 and 2012 when his relationship with Nicole Scherzinger hit the rocks, and McLaren engineers said that they knew when he was having problems with Nicole because his performance would fade, and therein lies the problem. If we're having the conversation under the following aegis, Lewis Hamilton winning the first for Ferrari and an 8th for himself, Therein lies the problem. If we of course are going to have ourselves a big boy conversation, lest we wish to be deemed abbots of unreason. No, not me, not never. What are you talking about? And to that point, Lewis Hamilton has said, you know what, I'm not going anywhere. Let me read out this quote. And again, he put it on Instagram. It feels like Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion, new lease of life settings. He's not going anywhere. Wolf of Wall Street settings. Let me tell you why that's important. Because Manish Pandey had said, by dint of his link to Luca Montezemolo, infinitely more connected to the Ferrari, Maranello and Fiorano's circumstance than you or I, that the rumour in Italy was that if Lewis Hamilton didn't like what he sees out of the red car with the yellow badge and the black prancing Corsa top during the Bahrain testing session, then potentially he would hang up his Nomex with immediate effect. And I couldn't hate that, chat. As much of a bombshell as that would have been, can't hate it. What does Lewis Hamilton owe to anybody? Of course I want to see him race again, like a rising Lewis Hamilton tide floats all F1 boats. Oh, I'll never step away from that. Not a businessman, he's a business common man. Like it's different things, right? It is different. Brand Hamilton and Brand, you get the picture already. We've gone through it ad nauseum. However, if Lewis Hamilton walked away and hung up his Nomex because he couldn't be bothered to dry an ish box of a Ferrari car, nobody couldn't hate him. Now again, Mama Cameron would want to throw her hat in and say, oh no, of course he can't retire. What does Lewis Hamilton owe to anyone? No, these parasocial relationships need to stop now. What for? Of course he can hang up his Nomex and go and date Kim Kardashian or Kylie or whoever, whatever he wants he can do. He said that he's going to put his personal life on hold. Now, however, having seen that Scuderia Ferrari have the rocket-fueled starts, that they've got the rotary wing, the innovative exhaust flap, doubling a doppelganger for the Sebastian Vettel blown exhaust diffuser. Like, of course he's going to be in because he feels like he might have a whiff. And of course he's Sir Lewis Hamilton. Here's his statement on the back of the second batch of testing at Bahrain. Put it on his Instagram. So again, this is the second stanza. I'm going to read it out from the first. That's a wrap on testing. He says, quote, it's inspiring to watch a team pull out all the stops to build a car. It's about bloody time, Lewis, I'll tell you that much, mate. It's the most fascinating part of this job for me. Everything is built from scratch and designed and redesigned over and over iteration settings. And then there are only a few of us who get to put the machine to the test. The feeling, says Sir Lewis, never gets old. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone in the team back at the factory for the hard work to get to this point. I am truly grateful. Listen, I'm hoping I don't want to get ahead of myself. Do you know what I mean? As a long time Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, 2006 settings. Don't let anybody come around here and say, oh, trump you with their brand new 2021 Lewis Hamilton fandom. No, we shan't have it. However, I don't want to get ahead of myself, chap. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm reserving judgment. I'm not holding my breath because Ferrari have been brilliant, almost metronomic in their ability to seize defeat from the jaws of victory. They never fail to disappoint. And herein lies the problem. Lucy's dating a woman, writing a paper without a parasocial relationship. F1 because 100%, John. You make the point. Mama Cameron is always right. Yeah, no, true. Sometimes. I hope they have an amazing romance. Me too. Lewis doesn't like the sim. No, he doesn't like the sim, does he? Easy. Oh no. Oh no. So 100%. Sean makes mistakes, but he will indeed outdrive Lewis. 86 points last season. I don't know. Lewis will have to improve massively. But again, it looks like he likes the car more. Okay, so through turn 10, he didn't look anywhere near as stable as one Charles Leclerc, but stabler than last year on year improvement. You bet your bottom dollar. For Pete's sake, Peter said it right from the start that Charles will always be the stumbling block for Lewis. I know, potentially. Go on then. Here's the rest of the piece. And again, scoot your eyes to the right hand side of your screen as far as Lewis Hamilton's second stanza in his statement. He says, I love this job so much, and I love working with a team and driving for the fans. I'm incredibly lucky to be able to do what I do, and I'm excited for the season ahead. Now, departure, a massive departure as far as Lewis Hamilton's intonation. Like he sounds and looks and feels like a completely different man, rejuvenated from the F1 purgatory that he's been in for as near as makes no difference. 4 years straight. Mercedes, it was always a problem from he announced that he would be at Ferrari. I mean, they were divorced, but they were living in the same house. It was purgatory is the right word for it. He was in a holding pattern, and that was never a good look. He couldn't operate the car. He didn't like the ground effect vehicles. He could never do the last of the late braking thing that so engenders or was so driven and rocket fueled his success down the years. Now he had the Brembo brakes that he didn't like. Carbon industries, what he's used to. Last year, some say this was Lewis Hamilton just playing his way into the Scuderia Ferrari crease. But even last year, when you heard Lewis Hamilton, well, I'm just slow, something's wrong with the car, it was always excuses. It was always, I'm not fast enough. It was always negative. It felt like we were watching a snuff film, the very end of days as far as Lewis Hamilton as an F1 driver. And it was painful. Even if you're not a Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, looking at that, how can you have empathy running through your veins and not feel sad about Lewis's the comments and the tone and the intonation and his countenance? It was negative at every single juncture, and he had a lot to be negative about when all was told. Whatever excuses you want to make, 86 points behind Charles Leclerc, that is chaos for a 7-time champion. Mount Rushmore, first round Hall of Fame, 86 points. That's and again, only beat Charles Leclerc on track a couple of times, most notably the Chinese sprint race. And then there was another time, wasn't there? Bloody Singapore. Was it Singapore? The same time when Oscar had his madness. Okay, so he was meant to switch up. No, it wasn't Singapore. It was Baku. So go on. Remember when he was meant to give Charles Leclerc the place back, but then he decided, no, I didn't know what happened. There were only a couple of times when he beat Charles Leclerc on track when neither one of them had DNF'd. And that's not a good look for Sir Lewis Hamilton. As well, then, he might be a little bit negative. To hear him speak like this, then, if this isn't a PR statement, if Lewis Hamilton has written this, then this feels like a paradigm shift in the way that Lewis Hamilton is approaching his job, his vocation, and his dream over at Scuderia Ferrari, the red car with a yellow badge and the black prancing horse on atop. I'm going to read this out again. I love this job so much, and I love working with my team and driving for the fans. Who is this guy? What have you done with Lewis Hamilton from 2025? Do you know what I mean? This is a brand new fella. He sounds different, right? More positive than previous. I'm incredibly lucky to be able to do what I do, and I'm excited for the season ahead. Well, touche, mate, especially if you've got yourself a god tier car. He continues, I'm reset and refreshed. Again, speaking to the difference, right? The paradigm shift in his attitude and countenance. I'm not going anywhere. What did we say, chat? What did we say? Now, I don't want to pad my own book, but I've been saying this, that Manish Pandey said, again, closer to Montezemolo and therefore the Fiorano circumstance than you or I, that there was a very real possibility that Sir Lewis could retire if he didn't like the look of the Scuderia Ferrari package, Project 678, SF26 at Bahrain. And that's Lewis Hamilton, for me, confirming that was at the very least a possibility, one that he's not going to take up now that he has a whiff. But bloody Nora, way to tell me that retirement was an option. LA Thorn, you're a legend. Been a fan of Lewis since 07. Been loyal through the ups and the downs. I still firmly believe in him. And that given a front-running car, you can't count him out. He isn't washed. 2025 was an anomaly. It's LA. We will speak to that, mate. We will speak to that. Because was it just 2025 that constituted the anomaly? 2 of the 3 seasons alongside George were losing seasons, right? I would argue that since 2020, again, if we're going to play balance games for a second, Lewis got the rookie, got lucky enough there. Go on, I'd argue that since 2021, that there's been a change in Sir Lewis, and understandably slow, right? Abu Dhabi fought tooth and nail with Max Verstappen, who is a fire-breathing dragon of an F1 peddler, one of the greatest that you will ever see. fight tooth and nail with him, and then Michael Massey does what he does in 2021, and it gets techier than techie things. How do you like recovering from that? I would struggle. That's resilience, right, to come back from that. But do you come back the same? Cameron Senior would always say of the big fights, the rumble in the, and again, this is analogous, not the same, but similar. If we're talking sports athletes experience, he would always say that a rumble in the jungle, Ali versus Foreman, and the same thing, the thriller in Manila and Ali versus Frazier, that boxers, the fighters, would never recover from those, that you leave a piece of yourself in that ring. And I say that if only to say this: did Lewis leave a piece of himself in that car at the end of Abu Dhabi? Will we ever see? Could you even expect reasonably to see that Sir Lewis Hamilton come again? Or is it more reasonable to expect that that dude had been lost forever? I mean, it's a traumatic experience, fighting every second of every race over the course of the 22 in 2021, only to lose it on the final lap of Abu Dhabi. You may never come back the same from that, just like Cameron Senior said about the great fights in the thriller in Manila and all those other. I just don't think you come back the same, and I'm not sure Lewis will come back the same, as sad as that may sound. Let me finish reading this out though. This statement is fascinating. I'm reset, he says, and refreshed. Now, is he speaking about 25 and 24, or is he speaking to 2021? I would love to ask the question, to what are you referring, Lewis? From what have you reset and refreshed? This is an important distinction. I'm not going anywhere, so stick with me. To what are you referring, Sir Lewis? Are you talking about the rumour that you could have hung it up? That sounds like it must be it to me. For a moment, he says, I forgot who I was, but thanks to you and your support, you're not going to see that mindset again. Now, I think he's talking there to the multitude of negative statements and quotables that we saw on the back of the 2025 struggle. His struggle to acclimatise to the circumstance that is Fiorano and Maranello. Got to learn the language. I mean, Michael Schumacher's blueprint is the blueprint, right? Got to go out there and learn the language so that you can foster some rapport and curry some favour with the bloody team and the engineers, because Charles Leclerc can speak Italian. Ultimately, to finish first in the championship, first you have to beat your teammate. And again, that's the supposition, that's the stumbling block over which Lewis Hamilton will need to come. He continues, I'm reset and refreshed. I'm not going anywhere, Wolf of Wall Street setting, so stick with me for a moment. I forgot who I was, but thanks to you and your support, you're not going to see that mindset again. Well, I mean, when anything, this feels like, I don't want to call it recency bias, because the test overall was positive. Yeah, Lewis struggled a little bit through turn 10, but he said as much about the car and its handling dynamic, that they are twitchy, but they're easier to catch. That's what he struggled with last year, wasn't it? That's why Charles Leclerc could push the car more, because he was better able to deal with the temperamental dynamic of the SF25. Hamilton continues, I know what needs to be done. Oof. And he's speaking to the memos that he's been sending out, right, about the working culture. Adami now gone, new race engineer and performance engineer potentially incoming, someone with whom he can communicate properly. Now, I saw DC speaking to this on his latest podcast venture, and DC had this to say: did Lewis Hamilton make a mistake not stealing Bono, not leveraging nor weaponising the Michael Schumacher blueprint? And I would put this to DC: in 2026 there is so much contractual red tape, meaning therefore I don't think Lewis, even if he wanted to, can just lift and drop a Peter Bonington onto the Fiorano circumstance. I don't think that's the way this works, particularly as Mercedes, again with a view to counter this inevitable the inevitable courting of Peter Bonington as Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari race engineer, offered Bonington a promotion, didn't they, to keep him? And in that new contract, of course, there will be some sort of stipulation, a non-competitive. Of course, it still happens in F1 because it's an incestuous space. But don't think for a second that Toto wouldn't have done his best to circle the wagons around Peter Bonington in a way that I don't think was even contractually available to Benetton, with the likes of Rory Byrne and Brawn and Jean Todt, even when Michael Schumacher brought all of those bods, the God tier, the Holy Trinity, over to Scuderia Ferrari in 1996 when he joined. Lewis Hamilton continues, I know what needs to be done. I know what needs to be done, not we. You see all this? Sometimes he says we, but conveniently, sometimes he refers to the first person. I know what needs to be done. This is going to be one hell of a season. I've given everything to be here today. Let's go, team. Oh, the humanity. I would love to get high on Lewis Hamilton's supply. I really would, chat. It would be easy for me to do, but I cannot get rid of this trepidation. I can't drink from the Lewis Hamilton cup of hopium, not untrammeled at least by objectivity, because across the other side of the garage is modern day Jean Alesi, right, the one that they call Charles Leclerc, and he's not a bad peddler. I would argue, if we play negative Nancy for a second and balance games, I would argue that if you're Sir Lewis Hamilton at the age of 41, then the one person, not named Max Verstappen, that you don't want on the other side of the garage is Charles Leclerc. Fast as fudge, point to point, some say the quickest currently on the grid. You don't want him over there. If you've lost a tenth or two in pace at the ripe old age of 41, then the person that's going to show up those deficiencies most acutely, loudest, is modern day Jean Alesi. Therein lies the problem, Sunseeker. Cam, he would do all of 2026 to impress his knee. Oh my gosh, son, you can't say that. If there comes a day when he actually changes for the better and has his day of repent, oh my gosh, what are we doing, Eddie? They've repented somewhat. Then why not just bring back Rob Smet? True. Also, I suggested this to Shez earlier, to be fair, but I think Rob is invested, like Nico Rosberg, in other non-F1 F1 related projects just a little bit. I hope Charles wins the championship and leads Ferrari. Oof, I think if he wins, he'll stay though, surely. He loves Ferrari. Every time I hear from Charles Leclerc, he's talking about he wants to win a championship, not just by himself, but it means more to win one in the red overalls for the red team with the red car and the yellow badge with the black prancing Corsa top. He's a romantic, is Charles Leclerc. And now, I'll tell you what's worse, Aston Martin were an option before when everybody thought that Adrian Newey was going to build them a rocket ship out the box. Now it appears they have not. Where would Charles Leclerc go? Red Bull potentially, when people are saying that they've nailed the deployment of the battery, that they are market leaders in that. Mercedes potentially, but if I think the number of seats, the number of options has just done this with Adrian Newey's Aston Martin's underperformance. They cannot get out of their own way. I see confidence persevere. John, he's not bad, that Charles. For all the mistakes, go on, let's talk about Charles very quickly. Because for all of his mistakes, he's just, I feel like you can dial out those mistakes. You guys know I've been harsh on Charles Leclerc. So brilliant is he. It's love always, of course it is. But me saying modern day Jean Alesi, it's a difference in extents and not kinds. He's quicker than Jean, of course he is, and he makes less mistakes than Jean. Already in a shorter career, he's delivered upon his potential, not insubstantial potential, exponentially more than Jean Alesi ever did. But you understand where I'm going with it. Don't grice his razor me. The sentiment is this. Yeah, and still, Charles Leclerc's career, if it ended today, would be a story of unfulfilled potential. Now, in no small part because the car hasn't been commensurate. It's been twitchy, difficult to drive. But does that mean that he still doesn't make mistakes? Of course he makes a gazillion mistakes. Max Verstappen went all season last year, bless him, making maybe one and a half mistake, error of the unforced variety. How many did Charles make? More than that. And therein lies the problem. Do you know what I mean? He has a cheeky lapse of concentration. Now, you can attribute that to the car and it being difficult to drive. But yet and still, they're human errors. And I think he's still got that in his locker. You know how many times in FP1 I saw him bloody in the barrier? Baku, another brilliant example. Abu Dhabi, losing time on track, as if that surely isn't going to lead to any downstream ramifications if indeed you're fighting a fire-breathing dragon like a Max Verstappen or a King George Russell for a championship over the course of 24 races. I just think he still has brilliantly quick. Of course he is. To argue anything other than that would be simply disingenuous. But to argue that Charles still doesn't have that soft, vulnerable underbelly that can lead to some very critical, multitudinous mistakes, errors of the unforced variety, I feel would be me being disingenuous. People get deep. Listen, I tell you what, there's a parallel line between cult LH diehards and Charles Fossey, in that they just, for a lot, I don't want to disparage and I don't want to coat every fan with the same brush, but the proper die-hard ones have this brilliant, almost uncanny ability to close their eyes and avert their gaze away from the objective truth, and we can't do that on this channel, not now, not ever. User says, I think one way to look at it, one way to look at this, and a question to ask yourself, are there ways in which Lewis is better than Charles over the course of a season, especially if he can apply his preferred driving style? So user, the problem is this, mate. And again, I suppose, look, so the improvement that I see Lewis making, a lot of his speed comes from being last of the late breakers, and already in the graphics you can see he's doing that more and more, and in that comes speed. However, that Charles Leclerc already looks quicker, like he already looks quicker than Lewis. It is the honest truth. Seeing them on track and how comfortable they are. Now, can Lewis expedite for his learning curve and close that gap? It looks like he's been closing the gap on Charles throughout testing, so maybe. But he's a bit special, that Charles Leclerc is. Like the spiritual heir to Gilles Villeneuve's crown. I don't know. Charlie's emotion, as I said it before. Yeah, he's got a bit of emotion in him, but I don't know. I just think he makes the hard things look really easy sometimes, does Charles? I mean, he can race Max Verstappen for days, because who knows him better than modern day journalist? Like he's rapid and he races hard. Silverstone and time when he went nose to nose with Max Verstappen, and I get it. I understand it. I see the brilliance, but then in making the impossible things look almost routine, sometimes he makes the easy things look really, really difficult, like keeping it on the island. I don't know. Charles makes the most mistakes because he has to drag a car, which is a dog. He has to push to the outermost limits all the time. Showing that's what Charles Fossey will say, but I've seen it when he's made mistakes at Baku and Abu Dhabi sometimes, where it's just like, well, it's just a lack of, it's just attention. Do you know what I mean? Failing to hone it. He reminds me sometimes of the Charles of Lando. Do you remember Lando? Not last year, but year before last at Singapore, when he was 1,000 meters down. Not Singapore, Baku. And he was 1,000. No, it wasn't Baku, was it? Because that was Charles and Lando. There was one race when Lando was 1,000,000 miles down the track. I think it might have been Singapore, when he's 1,000,000 miles down the road from everybody else, and then he was just like 30 seconds down the road, and he was struggling to keep it out the barrier because he couldn't keep himself locked in. Charles, he has that in him as well. Probably not to the same extent as Lando, but similar. Cam, did you hear George say he can't wait to let the dogs out? I did not hear him say that. It was cryptic, but basically saying, yeah, I've been sat. No, I didn't hear him say that, Sunseeker, but it doesn't surprise me, mate. They've all been sandbagging to a greater or lesser extent, and that leaves me a little bit concerned, especially if George is saying that. Everybody says that Mercedes is a proper rocket ship. It looks far too stable. No longer is it the W13 that had the infinitely high performance curve, which was infinitely small and narrow, difficult therefore to access. This car is quick, torquey out of the bloody exits of the turns. The power unit is god tier. They've nailed the design synchronicity, about which Pablo Elizalde talks more succinctly than I ever could. I think they're going to be a tough team to beat. Mercedes, of course. And again, they're a bloody works team. So they've got all the advantages that can come from knowing the dimensions and the specifics, the nuances of the PU, and being able to build the gearbox and therefore the suspension around it. The likes of McLaren as the customer, and Alpine, okay, so it didn't hurt McLaren last year, nor the year before then. But yeah, you just feel like they'll have problems. Mercedes. Charles looked formidable on the last day, but he knows better than everybody else that beating a confident Lewis will be anything but easy. It's a good shout, Easy G. It is a good sound. Very, very techy, of course. We just want for the illegal fuel from Merck. No, I think that's a bit of a nothing burger silent hour. I think they'll be all right on fuel. Toto Wolff has said as much, hasn't he? They will be all right. But Toto said some things over the past week or so, some of which have been very, very techy. Charlie's worried about Mercedes powered cars and Max, not Lewis. Yeah, you might cry. I don't want to do the Lewis Hamilton slander today. I'm trying to make it a Lewis Hamilton celebration. Positivity always. Do you know what I mean? Now, why don't we beat Abbott 7 Reason and forget that Charles Leclerc is so quick? I've been up since about 1:30. You're a legend, Turtle. So now I've made a natural life. Can I have a nap at 5? Of course, Turtle. We're rounding third. They're going to run away in a minute. Veggie Fuel question for the rate. No, it won't be Veggie Fuel. But again, you're talking about the bloody stock feed thing, is it? I never understand this fuel. I don't know. But rest assured, Mercedes will have proper fuel, legal fuel, for race number 1. Cam, did you hear George say that he can't wait to let the dogs out? I've answered that already, Sunseeker. Mr. Harpy, all well and good saying Mercedes will dominate, but don't forget McLaren has the same engine with the same spec. So we touched on that earlier, Mr. Harpy. Through testing, Andrew Benson says that McLaren did not have the same engine as Mercedes, that Mercedes were using the up-to-date PU, whereas McLaren were not, and that is techier than techie things. LA Thorn, you're a legend. Not gonna lie, I cheered for Shaw when he won Monaco. I mean, epic. You know what I mean? Like, properly epic. But Shaw hasn't had to deal with a Lewis Hamilton as a teammate when a viable championship is at stake between. So to that point, LA, I don't disagree with you. I think Lewis is more battle hardened, more championship ready, given the fact that he is a 7-time champion, Mount Rushmore, etc. But I will say this to that speed is the greatest equaliser of all, right? That you can be more battle hardened, more championship ready. But if the other driver is simply quicker, as Lewis was in 2007 versus Fernando Alonso, then there's little else you can do. You know what I mean? All the race IQ and intellect and devilment that Alonso had and craftiness ultimately faded to black because Lewis was he was just so bloody blitzkrieg quick. Just didn't matter. It was like wholly offset by Lewis being so bloody pant-wettingly fast, right? And that's what I think. It's not lost on me, the irony. That's what I think Lewis Hamilton is dealing with now. The thing that made Alonso run away in 2007 is ultimately what could put paid to Lewis Hamilton's career in 2026. There's a bit of I'm trying to get this Benson thing for you. Oh yeah, here's the Benson thing. No. In fact, let me tell you this quickly. I meant to talk about rules and regs changes. So the compression ratio, nothing to see here. It sounds like all of the other teams with their little super majority, not named Mercedes, were desperate to change the rules. But it's some weird thing that Mark Hughes keeps talking about that's above my pay grade. It feels like the compression ratio, Mark Hughes says that when it's hot, the compression ratios go down. So what they proposed, what the teams wanted to do, is just test the compression ratios at ambient properly. Now, what they're proposing to do, the FIA and the PUAC, the Power Unit Advisory Committee, is that they're going to have 2 tests. They're going to test it at ambient and they're going to test it out on track. And all the other teams said, well, hang on. No, let's not do that. We don't want 2 tests. We only want 1, because potentially those teams and their power unit, those power unit manufacturers being Ferrari, Audi, Red Bull, Ford, that they could fall foul of a strenuous compression ratio test, which is chaos. That's the first rule and reg change. In the second instance, you would have seen them testing out on track a new starting procedure. Everybody's scared of a rerun of Riccardo Paletti 1982, the Canadian Grand Prix, that you could have somebody stall on the grid, potentially a front runner, and then somebody steaming in from the back, a Cadillac F1 car, could go head first into, you know what I mean? Peter Wynn's a friend of the channel, would always say that the most dangerous occurrence on track is when you've got a humongous speed differential. That's why Stella in particular keeps talking about the danger of the starting procedure, lest we forget that the tightrope walk, technical and mechanical, that the drivers will have to traverse on the starts is of course turbo spool and making sure that the battery is at its most charged as at the time when the lights go out. That's techie. Somebody's going to drop the ball. It's too techie. There are too many variables, too many plates for which they need to spit. And that's the problem, right? Why Stella and Oscar Piastri have been like, well, what's going on? And to that point, the FIA addressed it by giving them an extra 5 seconds, right, to try and juggle all these balls, to try and keep all of these plates spinning. The rumour is that they're going to make an additional rule and reg change, and it will look something like this. They've said that they were going to do active aero instant so that these guys, it looks all spectacular, super speedy off the line. Oscar Piastri said, well, you're going to have 22 cars off the grid all with like active aero. It sounds like a recipe for disaster. It sounds like you're shooting for a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. That's what Oscar said, and Andrea Stella agrees. So potentially between now and Australia, all the teams are going to come together and maybe make sure that it will not be active aero off the grid into turn 1, because again, that feels a lot safer. If indeed we can't have a Formula 1 that's too safe. There have been too many danger and risk are always front row. Stella wants to nerf Ferrari, true also, because that Ferrari's too bloody quick off the line now. Yeah, it's not about who's fast, it's about who can manage better into it. Starfish Trooper, that's the problem, isn't it? That George and Max have said that it's the managerial championship. Did you see, by the way, I want to bring this up, but I don't want to get into trouble with the Lord and Commander, that is the commercial rights holder, that won't allow anybody to show any footage. There's a piece of footage when you can see, I'll close on this, is really, really important. There's a piece of footage. Remember, Max has said it's anti-F1, that it's Formula E. Leave all the battery nonsense to Formula E. The potential leave because it's too boring and the cars aren't fun enough to drive unless we reduce the rate, we reduce the, as a percentage of the whole, if we're talking about power, if we reduce the extent to which we're dependent on the battery, because that's Formula E. Max Verstappen said this, to which George said, well, it's not that bad. Whatever. Lando rage baited by saying, I actually enjoy driving these cars, until you try and overtake someone. That's when it's techie. Science said it's really, really difficult to overtake already. And then you see the evidence, the case A, B, and C of it. When Max Verstappen approaches Valtteri Bottas on the straight, comes as if he's going to overtake him, and then all of a sudden, what happens? Max Verstappen loses his battery. No more charge. There is no more space at the overtaking in there for. At which point, Bottas starts to charge away, and then what happens to Bottas? His battery goes empty, and then Max Verstappen. It's just, I'm telling you, it needs explaining. It needs a bit of work. The broadcasters need to get their arms around this between now and the next 13 days when we get ourselves Australia, because otherwise it is going to be more than problematic. You're just not going to understand. Okay, so you've got the lights that show the clipping. That will help. But it'd be handier. I mean, imagine seeing that Bottas is doing something like he's harvested to where it'll have enough battery charge to defend to Max Verstappen. Imagine seeing that graphic on the screen. They'll have to sort it out. Otherwise, what could be a half decent championship, intriguing at the very least, will be lost in translation, and nobody. I mean, you want to grow a sport. Already lost $2 billion worth of market capitalization. F1. Do you want to lose another $2 billion? Well, if not, then fix your fudging broadcast and translate these very complicated messages in a way that's useful and value add. EasyG, he didn't need to do any different because it was enough to win until illegal calls were made. Oh, EasyG, we're going there again. It wasn't Verstappen, it was Hadjar. Dexter, you might be right there, mate. Whoever it was not a good look. I saw the graphic that said Verstappen. True mastery. Mastery is the quietude of the mind amidst the cacophonous roar of 22 engines vying for immortality. Bloody Norris Arroyo the pleb. And on that note, do you know what I mean? Right, way to get overly verbal. Why use one word, Soraya the pleb, when you can use 1,000? And when you guys have been legends, we go again, same time, same place tomorrow. Between now and then, what are we doing? Yeah.